Cosey, Fanni, Tutti, 2003.
I wonder if you remember how you got together with, Peter and Chris.
Yeah, I remember Peter because that's how he got his nickname Sleazy from the first night we ever met him. Because the way he approached us was very sleazy, and so we nicknamed him that from that night on. But yeah, he came into, as far as I can remember, it was the Oval House when we were doing a performance piece there, and he introduced himself after the show and said he was really interested in what we were doing and things.
Cosey, Fanni, Tutti, 2003.
Cosey, 2003.
Well, interested in knowing what you were doing, prior to Coombe, and how did you decide to do what you were doing with Coombe Transmissions? What was your childhood like? Tell us about
my childhood.
Yeah, tell us about your childhood.
Oh yeah, it's in the records book, I think.
Is it?
I came from I've always said I came from a working class family, but the friend of mine that I grew up with said to me, "You were always middle class," because I had professional parents.
Oh, right.
But I came from, I don't know what you'd call them in America, but it's like a council estate here. It's government housing. So I came from there, and it was quite rough. And the town where I was born and brought up was the second roughest in Britain at the time to Glasgow, and it still is. It's just been labelled as the worst city to live in Britain. But so I had a hard childhood, and I had to literally fight my way up. So I was used to confrontation, so it didn't bother me in the least. So and I was used to having to stick up for what I felt was right and right for me. So I suppose I had good grounding.
Talking to Peter, I kind of asked him a similar question. It was more along the lines we were talking about transgressive behavior and interests in transgressive behavior, and when you may have first had a realization that you had an interest in such things. And for him, he referenced actually wrestling, a 10-year-old wrestling match with a schoolmate, and suddenly realizing that he had, a somewhat of a sexual arousal, having an interest, and that for him as someone who came to identify himself as gay, it was sort of a trigger for him, being that he's automatically been placed into an out of bounds position to really begin to explore what is out of bounds and what's not out of bounds. Did you have any kind of a similar experience, or do you recall when you maybe first became aware of things besides whatever they might show you on the television?
I don't think so. I know that when I was in junior school, which so I would be about 8 years old, I can remember it stayed in my mind that I must have had an actual target of I was okay if I could physically overpower everyone in my class except my boyfriend. So I felt good in myself. I had the power over everybody but the person I chose not to have power over. I can remember that very clearly. Mm-hmm. That at one time there was everyone in my class. I could actually, if I wanted to, sort them out. I can remember that very clearly, and I can remember being a couple of times being found in compromising positions with different people in the class, in the playground area or in the store cupboard. Mm-hmm. And that was before I was 10 years old. So I was already, and I was always in trouble, always. And I was always, my closest friends were boys. And not particularly boyfriends in a sexual way, but
right.
Just very close friends. So I was different in that respect.
Cosey, Fanni, Tutti, 2003.
Well, how did you meet Genesis then?
I met him at the Hull University. I'd gone there with a friend of mine, and there was an acid test on, and we dropped acid, and he was there. He wasn't on acid, but he was there with some friends of his, because I think he just dropped out of university then. And I remember seeing him and wondering whether it was an hallucination or not, because he had a stuck-on beard and he took it off. And when you're on acid, that's a bit... You sort of expect things like that almost. But that's the first time I ever met him. And then I heard about a week later that Genesis was looking for me, and someone gave me his phone number or something. I can't remember really.
So was that an acid test in the sense that it was a sanctioned study of the effects of acid?
No, it was just an excuse to drop acid.
Uh-huh.
I think they had a few there at the university called them acid tests, and they just had all different things going on in the room,
Mm-hmm.
And music and stuff.
So it wasn't a school-sanctioned event. It was
No, it was at the university.
extracurriculaire, though, right?
Yeah.
Well, so you and Genesis tracked you down. You had that mutual experience. So how did your work together develop then?
Well, I got thrown out of home, and I needed somewhere to live. So he was staying there was this commune in town, and I rented a room opposite his because he was staying with a friend of his at the time. And then we moved in together, and he was doing a sort of improvised acoustic music at the time, and I'd go along to whatever he was doing, and then we got more involved, and I started making costumes and things like that, and then I started joining in with the performance pieces that we did. But before that, I was mixing with a lot of people in music anyway, and I'd already sort of branched out on my own, if you like.
Cosey, 2003.
You've all more or less stated that you were never really musicians. Maybe you're still not. I don't know if that's changed at all, your consideration of yourself as a musician or a non-musician.
I don't know really, because I don't know. It's got a definition that I'm not all that comfortable with musician.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you say you're a musician, people immediately, even now, say, "Oh, maybe you could come and do some songs then," or they immediately think that you can write music for one thing.
Right.
And you compose. So I don't know. I just
Sure.
do music and art, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, sure. We'll come around and play some songs for you.
Yeah, I mean, when Nick our son was at school, the teacher there said, "Would you like to come and play?" And they said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I play guitar." And they said, "Would you like to come play some guitar for the children?" I said, I don't think so. It's not that kind of music.
We did play Hamburger Lady at my high school, and we actually got school credit for studying TG.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, and just before you played your last show in 1981.
Oh, that's good.
So it's all positioning, I suppose.
Well, how old were you then?
I was 17.
Oh, right. Well, this was like they were all under 10 years old. So I think they were thinking I'd come along with the guitar and sing Kumbaya or something,
Exactly.
Cosey, Fanni, Tutti, 2003.
Sounds like Coom really just sort of evolved in a very natural way, where it just hanging out together and then beginning to perform together. And
and a lot of people used to come round where we lived, because we had a very old house in Hull that we rented from an old guy, and it had about 21 rooms in it. It was an old toffee apple factory. We'd have a big, what was called the drum room, and we'd have a drum kit set up in there, and we'd do all sorts of things, And people just used to come round, and then we'd co-opt them into whatever we're doing at the art centre or whatever, or the street. And they'd come along and we'd say, "What have you ever wanted to do all your life?" One guy had always wanted to be a priest, so I made him a priest outfit, and another guy was really into horror films, so he'd come along and do stuff. It was all things like that, really.
Was there a conscious decision to? I mean, it seems there was a fairly conscious decision to leave the art, the quote unquote art world or the gallery scene from what people say, and to do something different, which was Throbbing Gristle. And did that happen? Was that something that happened when it was between you and Genesis and Peter? And when did Chris come along?
Chris came along before Peter, actually.
He did.
With Throbbing Gristle, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
We started doing music in the studio, and Chris was coming along as well and jamming with us. And then Sleazy would come along in the studio but wouldn't do anything live for a little while, and then started doing stuff out front, and then ended up on stage with us. But the thing was that when we started doing the music with Chris didn't want to be a part of Coombe, and we were changing all round really, and Genesis and I had sort of not had enough of the art world, but we'd realised that we were more interested in doing what we were doing then with Chris, and so we decided to have the retrospective of the ICA and launched Throbbing GRISTLE at the opening of it.
Cosey, Fanni, Tutti, 2003.
Was there ever a manifesto with Throbbing GRISTLE? Was there a statement of intention that you all kind of came up with, or was it again just something that was allowed to evolve on its own?
To some extent it evolved on its own, but I think throughout the newsletters we had little statements in the IR newsletters about our stance and our sort of philosophy, really. I mean, right from Coombe days and into TG, all of us individually, before we even got together, had a very strong sense of independent thought and challenging things and expectations and what's acceptable or not, that kind of thing. So separately, we're that kind of person anyway, and then all four of us came together as TG. So, I mean, the power behind that, was really intense. And we believed really as TG, and I think we all still do individually, that everyone really should free up themselves, and be open to new things and be themselves and express themselves and not accept anything less than what is, capable of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's one of the things, we were talking to Peter about too, and the idea that obviously a lot of what you did was perceived by various, different organizations, different groups of people as either, something that's very ugly or very wrong or dangerous, and kind of wondering, if contrasting perhaps the reactions that you might have had to TG at that time to the reactions that to the cultural sort of mores then as compared to now. Has there been a real change, do you think? Or have things more or less stayed the same? What kind of a situation does someone who is interested in exploring something that would be labeled transgressive between then and today? What kind of things? How do you think the society has changed, if at all?
I think there's a misconception that it's a bit more permissive now, and I don't think it particularly is, because as far as I can figure out, I was talking to someone recently about this kind of thing and people's attitude to art and expressing different things like this and putting yourself on the line by your music or your art. And what's tending to happen now is that artists are sort of almost plundering the past, like for our time or whatever, and taking the ideas and presenting them as their own, or they're taking the ideas and presenting them in a cleaned up form that's more acceptable by acknowledging that it's your work. So they're sort of saying, well, it's not my responsibility now because I didn't actually do it, but it is art. So they get round it that way, which is also quite disturbing, because they take what was controversial then and is now recognised as having validity, and they present it now when they know it's still risque and controversial and transgressive. But by someone else having done it in the first place, their responsibility for it and having to answer for it is nil. But they can still take credit for it as being art and their art now because they presented it differently. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Mm-hmm, yeah. Do you think that, that what you're doing now is Chris and Cosey, is it, do you experience that kind of outside pressure or resistance less so than you might have? TG, I would think that, really what you're doing to a certain extent is different, and it's probably perceived in a different fashion. Yeah,
I think it is, because what we do isn't aggressive.
Right.
And I think TG was aggressive.
Well,
but I mean, I'm not so sure aggression would work now.
Why is that?
Because I think people are just, for want of a better phrase, punch drunk. You know, I mean, you can only hit some people on the head with a hammer so long before they, just, I'm still going to, it don't make no difference to me. So, I mean, I think you have to be a bit more subtle than that now. And personally, I mean, over the years that Chris and I have worked, we've taken it to a very personal level, really. I mean, it was with TG, but we actually put things out there and demanded things of people more with TG.
Mm-hmm.
And the music was aggressive so that demand was really clear, and it hit them on the head almost.
Yeah, well, it was very different, and I think what you're saying about what people have done with some of that work from the past and presenting it now, what they really bring across more than rather than bringing across any content or real philosophy behind it, it's more of a shock value thing, and that is that rubber mallet that's just they beat everyone over the head with shocking imagery, but where is it? What is it based in? You know what I mean?
Cosey, 2003.
One of the things that Peter mentioned was that there's actually some interest, I guess, from
Tate Gallery. Yeah.
Tate Gallery is interested in doing something with the work of Throbbing Gristle.
Yeah.
I guess, and somehow archiving it, or what's that all about?
We're still in discussions with them, but yeah, they're interested in doing something with TG because, I mean, I think they recognise what we did now, all these years later, or whatever, But it was very powerful. I mean, and it's difficult for us to take that on board in a way, because when you've done it and all these years later you've worked yourself through it, and then you hear from people, oh, I was this age when this went on, and it affected me a great deal, and now I do this. It's fantastic to hear that, but it's almost like I can't really quite relate to that. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's something that it's almost like it was a process, part of your life that was a process that you've lived through and moved on.
Yeah.
And you have another life entirely now, I suppose. Well, not entirely, but you have your life today.
And TG did have a life of its own, and we were all really driven. And I don't know about the others, but I mean, so much was going on at the time, and all different tangents, because I was doing things other than TG anyway. But I mean, people say, "What did you think of then?" and so on. I didn't analyse what I was doing while I was going along. I was too busy doing it.
Peter said something very similar, that really he doesn't remember, even now when, if he, during a performance, after the performance, he can't remember really what happened,
No.
because it's being there and it's being taken away. He talked about the trance, aspect of that, the deeply sort of active trance aspect of it, as opposed to a quiet, withdrawn trance. What else were you doing besides Throbbing Gristle at the time?
Well, I was doing the magazine modelling, and I started dancing as well. And the art side of things was still going on a little bit. There were remnants of that still coming through. So it was a real busy time, and we were running Industrial Records as well as doing TG. So you're running a record label and all the rest of it as well.
When did you start dancing, and what prompted that?
I'd been doing the magazine work, and the ICA in '76 was a culmination of that. And I met a girl shortly before then who was doing dancing, and she was talking to me about it, and it quite appealed to me to go on to do that. And I got in touch with her agency and went and auditioned, and I started dancing. I think it was about '77. I'm not sure.
What kind of environments were you doing that in?
Pubs, bars.
So what was it about it that was appealing to you?
The fact that it was bars. You could walk down the street in London, Whitechapel area, or anywhere, or right across London, and you'd just come to a working man's bar, like postal workers, telephone exchange workers, having their lunch break, having a beer, and they would have a stage there and a DJ, and girls would get up and dance topless, and then you'd go around with a pint glass and collect money, and you would strip off if they put enough money in your glass. I just liked the whole thing. It was just so base, you know. There was nothing glitzy about it at all. And I liked that. You had contact with the customers, and yet there was this fantasy thing going on at the same time. It's a very different world to sort of Paul Raymond and that kind of thing that was going on as well.
Do you think does that kind of environment still exist today, or has it changed? Has it been taken over by, you know, business interests that put a polish on it?
Well, it's lap dancing and pole dancing now. But one of the pubs I used to go to a lot that was really well known is a lap dancing club now. But it's still going. I mean, 20 odd years later, which is quite strange. Chris took my photograph outside of it last year. I can't believe it was still there.
So it's still relatively unchanged then.
The inside's different. I think they've just got poles in for the girls.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a different thing altogether now. It's nothing like it was.
Well, what is different about it?
I think it's less, even less personal, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
When I did it, the girls had personalities of their own. I think what I tend to see now is all the girls more or less look the same. You know, have the same kind of routines and so on. But when I did it, the girls had their own little sort of speciality acts that they used to do, and they were all known for the different things that they did, like strippers of years ago as well. You know, but I don't see that it's the same now, really.
Cosey, 2003.
Yeah, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, you know, the end of Throbbing GRISTLE and just, you know, how you felt about that. I mean, yeah, it was time. You came out here and did your last two performances in California and broke up shortly after. And just kind of wondering if you'd like to talk about a little bit of the, you know, what was involved in the breakup, if it, you know, emotionally, and was it just time to do it? What were the reasons for deciding to do it then, to stop?
Well, there were personal reasons, and I don't think because the personal reasons got in the way of TG being what it really was all about. So I wasn't prepared to live a lie still. So I moved out, and then TG ended after the 2 gigs in America. So, but I'm not going to go into the personal side of it because it's
personal. Personal.
But it's all in the record book anyway.
Oh yeah, yeah.